a budget. Your budget is X. You're coming in and you're doing things that make sense. Furniture, carpet, that makes sense. Coming in and saying, okay, we're going to do a facelift and you do all of these other things, it really doesn't make sense, because those are some of those things should be things that are taken care of under regular maintenance, not taken care of every time you switch a president or every time you switch a VP or every time you take,
When you're filing taxes, when you're answering those questions, if you're using TurboTax or whatever software, they will ask you, if you have assets like bonds.
Correct.
But then there's also taxation of income derived from treasuries. This is purchasing of bonds. This is something that's very popular, that's been marketed to diasporans. Unaambiwa utapata a certain percentage rate, very popular option for marketing to diasporans.
Kwanza Lawrence, umenunua bonds. Hebu tuambie.
Now, the bill proposes to subject to tax the interest income by resident persons from all listed bonds, notes, and other similar securities used to raise funds for infrastructure and other social services, commonly referred to as infrastructure bonds. Accordingly, 5% withholding tax shall be applicable on the payment of such interest to resident persons. However, the interest earned from infrastructure bonds listed prior to this proposal coming into force shall continue to be exempt from tax. In addition, no withholding tax shall apply on such interest paid to non-resident persons. So basically what this means is that I think these infrastructure bonds, part of the appeal was that they were tax-free. But now it seems like on the interest that you make, there's a 5% withholding. So I don't know whether it's taxed right away every year or if it's taxed after when you withdraw the money.
When is it effective?
The effective date of this one, I don't have the
I think it's July
date.
1st. I think most of these things are July 1st.
Most of them are
if
July
I'm not
1st.
wrong, but I could be wrong, but okay.
Yeah. So that's another big thing. Then there's also other bonds that are called green bonds. It says the bill proposes to subject tax to the income accruing from all listed bonds, notes, or other similar securities used to raise funds for infrastructure projects and assets defined under the green bond standards and guidelines. However, the interest earned from green bonds listed before 1st July 2024 will continue to be exempt from tax. So basically, if you have any kind of bonds in Kenya, after July 1st, whatever you earn from them will start getting taxed. Personally,
but I thought that's interesting. I thought the whole point of bonds was the bonds were helping the gava, or are they talking about are they talking about government bonds or all bonds?
No, so this bonds, I think they're coming. These are bonds coming from the government, the infrastructure bonds.
Yes, but if I am helping you, why are you then now turning around and taxing me on the interest of me helping you?
No, you give them a loan.
That's why I said that. No, but that's why I
know,
say that I'm helping
sense.
you, right?
It doesn't make
without
sense.
Okay, so when you float those bonds out there, I will say I'd rather take my money elsewhere where I wouldn't get taxed, because you're telling me that the minute that I come in and you're giving me this interest for which I am giving you loan, you're now going to turn around again and tell me, oh, by the way, you now need to pay me X based upon the income I've made.
Think about it. Even in America, if you get any kind of interest, be it from a bank account or from bonds, it will be taxed, but it will be taxed as regular income.
Okay. And I could be wrong.
Yeah.
We are going back to, these are government bonds we're talking about. We're not talking about playing the market, right?
No, government bonds get taxed even in America.
Okay. For me, I think it's...
It doesn't make sense. I agree with you.
I think it's asinine.
I agree with you. It doesn't make sense. But it's taxed as regular income because interest from bonds, like when you're filing taxes. So like in America, they're not going to tax it directly, but when you're filing taxes, when you're answering those questions, if you're using TurboTax or whatever software, they will ask you, if you have assets like bonds.
Correct.
So whatever income you make from those bonds, the government will tax it. But in this case, the Kenyan bonds, they already have a set percentage. They don't care about your income. So let's say like you have a low income here.
Yes.
If you're within the standard deduction, then you won't get, those bonds will not get taxed. And I think these are the things that people need to...
But those are the finer details that are not being implemented, where somebody's saying, okay, yeah, I know in America they're taxing, so even us less tax. Okay, so how are they breaking down this taxing? How is this taxation being occurring, right?
But I think income...
Because they're also looking, they weigh the factors. There's a weighted scale on this. This one seems like we're declaring it and this is what it is, and you'll give us whatever we feel you should give us.
Yeah, I mean, now when you start taxing the way they're taxing, it's going to discourage some people from buying the bonds, especially institutional investors.
Ali, people didn't buy bonds the last time around. They failed on the short-term bonds.
Yeah.
The guys refused to buy them. They had to pretty much pull them back. They lost money on those bonds, right? So now you're going to come back and tell Jamas, okay, we're going to float these bonds out here because we want you guys to give us a loan so we can operate. Yeah. And we guarantee we'll pay you X amount within time X, time Y, for you to get your money back, right? It's gonna bring problems in my opinion, and I think that they would be the losers. And here's the thing: you're coming from a nation where people have not been taxed on diddly squat to now where you want to tax them on even what they pull out of their pocket, and you have to find a way or a balance of easing this in so that folks understand that being taxed is not, it's part of living in today's world, right? Because you need the taxes to do and operate and do things. But part of the issue we have is even with the taxing, in as much as you want to get it to whatever, 22%, 88%, it doesn't matter, you still don't do anything that the person who's paying the taxes can see. There's nothing tangible. Right, we don't have because we're talking about the infrastructure bonds and all of those sorts of things. We don't see those services coming back down on the ground, but yet we see folks rolling around with taxpayers' money, wearing $500,000 watches. There's a problem with that type of optics, whether you used your own chums or you didn't. I'm paying for you, paying taxes, and you're sitting around telling me that you want to renovate a home that was renovated within the last 4 years for 600 million.
Yeah.
So there's a problem with the optics behind that, right?
100%.
And when it's broken down and you look at the stuff and you see the line items, it doesn't make sense that somebody's saying, I'm going to go renovate it's not called Harambee House, it's called Harambee something.
The annex,
right? Which during Ruto's term, it was renovated. Prior to that, the first person who started with that place was Rao, right? So when Ruto came in, he renovated it. And there's a difference between a renovation and vitukama furniture, because renovation means that possibly you could even be pulling walls down, you could be moving things around, changing offices around, you could be doing all sorts of different things. So what is it that wasn't working for that? It's almost like somebody coming into the White House and saying, okay, you know what, I'm not just going to change the carpet and the furniture. I'm coming in, I'm breaking walls down, I want to have my own, whatever floor here, I want it to have an expansive this, the bedroom is not going to be the bedroom as it was, I want it to have 3 little rooms next to it. You can't do that because those things are set. And the only way that the taxpayers' money is not spent at the rani is we have to quell these things in. You have a budget, your budget is X, you're coming in and you're doing things that make sense, furniture, carpet, that makes sense. Coming in and saying, okay, we're going to do a facelift and you do all of these other things, it really doesn't make sense because some of those things should be things that are taken care of under regular maintenance, not taken care of every time you switch a president or every time you switch a VP or every time you take, you know what I'm saying? So it's basically you're robbing Peter to pay Paul and you're the Paul in this case.
I was listening again, some people were very knowledgeable on these infrastructure bonds.
Yes.
And they were saying that at some point, like, because the infrastructure bonds are, let's say like now, Ali, you, Asheke, it's something that you can participate in.
Correct.
Because the returns are timam.
Yes.
So what happens is when you're offering an 18% return on them, what happens is the banks decide, you know what, we're not going to lend. I'm not going to lend Ali. Because if I told Ali, I can, you can give me 6% or almost 3% or whatever. If I can get 18%, and so there's this idiot from Mbere North, a guy called Geoffrey Roku, was trying to say how the policies of the government have seen companies make a lot of money. And somebody pointed out, Sam Gituku pointed out that it's because that those guys decided to invest in infrastructure bonds. If you're getting 18%, if you decide to invest on a thing that's going to give you 18%, of course, let's now say tax-free, why would I not invest? That means I'll pull my monies, right?
Yeah.
And say, you know what? Infrastructure bonds, 18%, shika. Small businesses, SMEs, they're coming to borrow chums. I'm like, you know what? As we're going to give you at 20%.
Yeah.
Outer West make.
Yeah.
Outer West make.
Yeah,
so
that's right. It's increasing the cost of borrowing.
Exactly. It does. So these guys, the banks, so you'll find that, and I think like core banks and banks, you're looking at 60 billion Kenya shillings. You're like, they're getting some serious returns because wamefanya nini? They have invested in those infrastructure bonds. So would it be good? Of course, now what's going to happen probably is if they decide, you know what, they're gonna be chaping taxes on what you make after investing, you'll find that most of those guys are going to probably pull out. So maybe it might be an opportunity for a regular guy to invest in them. But still, again,
now,
yeah, but why?
But
if
Ali, please,
if the whole point was that I'm supposed to make 18%, and then of that 18%, maybe I'm still giving you back.
So I'm not going to.
Hold on.
As a bank, I'm not going to invest.
I'm just, yes, correct. But then I'm saying, like, now you're saying that regular Mwananchi right now is being told, okay, these things would come back at 18%. However, we will tax you, say, I don't know, 5 or 8.
So
it doesn't
income,
matter, does it?
income on bonds in most places, they do get taxed.
Yeah, but it's not going to be something that is substantive.
So
Right.
So let me give an example of America. So let's say you have bought bonds, government bonds worth let me say
100,000.
100,000. And then government bonds here in the US, maybe they'll give you something like 3%. They usually don't have a very good rate. 3% for, let's say 4%. So now you have $4,000 worth of income. The way it works in America, and Washeke, correct me if I'm wrong, I think bonds are taxed the same way capital gains are taxed.
Okay.
Meaning when you cash it out
Understood.
is when you will
Because that's when you're gaining.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's when you're
That's
gaining.
like what, 15%?
Now if you wait. I think for bonds, I'm confusing the two. I think for bonds, like Washeke, please correct me here, and because I don't want to mislead people. So I know with capital gains, let's say like if you have a stock, whatever you make from the stock, you will not pay any tax until the day when you sell the stock.
Yes.
Yeah. Now with bonds, I think it's taxed right away because this income, unlike stocks, which sometimes goes to rebuy the stocks again, with bonds they give you the cash. Let's say like you make 4%, they will deposit $4,000 into your account. Now that is considered income. So if your taxable income is 80,000, now with that 4,000, your new taxable income is now 84,000. So if you're in that 25% bracket, kwa hiyo 4,000, they will take 25%. Which is why I want people to hear me out. At a personal level, this is not financial advice, but to me, bonds are very bad investment. They are very bad investment, and that's just to me. And I think I'm biased because I personally do not do interest investments. But I think generally speaking,
haram.
Generally speaking, no, forget about even haram. When when you go compare a portfolio, let's say like a 401k portfolio that's 100% equities, S&P 500, and you go compare to these things they give people, and I know majority of you who have 401ks, you have a target date fund. I have some news for you. Those target date funds, they have the highest fees, and they rarely beat. When you look at the long run, they rarely beat an S&P 500 fund. Just go check. What is a
what? Where? What?
It's called a target date fund.
What is that?
Unaona, like when you're opening a 401k, they will ask you, for simplicity, when do you plan to retire? So unasema maybe
expiration date, basically.
Yeah, maybe. So for someone like Omosh who's retiring in 2025, he'll say,
I thought it was 2015.
Okay, but on paper it's 2025.
Okay, sir.
Yeah, but for a young person like me who's retiring in 2055 or 2065, wataniweka kwa a fund.
Please.
So what they typically do, the closer you get to retirement, they increase the amount of bonds. So the higher the amount of bonds you have in your portfolio, when you look at the average in the long run, you're getting a lower return. You know, this is just a news flash. Free advice I'll give you: if you're selecting a 401k fund, just go ask if there's one that's 100% equities, either total stock market or S&P 500. These target date funds, ndo hivyo, because they have a lot of bonds in them. And those bonds, they tend to pull down your portfolio. Because stocks have a 10% average return in the long run. Bonds, they could sometimes even average, when you base it on the amount on the face value that you took, sometimes it could even average 2% or even less. So that's a tangent. That's a besides the point.
Revisionist.
So are you saying that you're talking about bonds in the US?
Me, I'm talking about bonds everywhere. Now, okay, with this infrastructure bonds.
But over here, Trish says capital gains are taxed even here. And Washeke says in the US, bond interest is taxed in the year it's received.
Okay, so then that's the correction I needed. So bonds are not taxed like capital gains. Capital gains for stocks will be taxed the date when you sell the stock. So you can even hold a stock for 30 years.
30 years.
It will never be taxed.
Correct, yes.
Until the date when you
offload it.
When you offload it is when it's
like
going to get taxed. Yeah. It's when it will get taxed. Similar to also appreciation of a house.
So Washeke says here,
target
dates are a big issue and are being phased out due to increase for 1K lawsuits over high fees and low performance.
Yes.
So eventually, which means that probably there's some guys
a lot of people,
like
I'll tell you, 9 out of 10. I haven't seen your 401ks, but I'm telling you, 9 out of 10 chances, most of you guys have a target date fund. Because that's what, HR departments, because HR departments are also not trained in finance. They'll tell you this is the simple thing to do. So T. Rowe Price, a lot of these companies that offer 401ks, they will tell you that this is the simple thing you can give people. Simple, but not knowing it has the highest fees.
Simple, but with the most gain for them.
With the most gain for them.
Yes.
With the most gain. Because they have to justify why they're charging you those fees. Remember, with an S&P 500, it's an index. You're not doing anything. So S&P 500 funds are typically some of the lowest, they have the lowest fees, or total stock market. But story for another day. So bonds, even when we talk about the infrastructure bonds in Kenya, I mean, of course, people from my community, by my community I mean Islam, we don't touch those because ni riba. It is interest. But now let's take out that part and just let's look at that bond for someone who is living in the United States. So you're given an infrastructure bond, 15%. That thing looks good. It looks like a really solid investment, right?
Correct.
Yeah. So you took this bond maybe 10 years ago when the dollar was 80 bob. So when you now start calculating that 15%, when you start calculating, because remember, you converted your dollars to Kenya shillings to buy those bonds. but you earned your money in dollars.
Yes.
So now, when you start calculating that rate of return in dollars, 15%, depending on the rate fluctuation, it can easily go down to 5 or 4%. Very easily. And then, of course, this is also being taxed. These bonds are also being taxed. You're not getting the full amount. It's also being taxed.